So step one is cleaning up the edges of the flatwork. I like using a smooth hand file for this, and then going to some 220 grit sandpaper. This just ensures that the wire doesn't snag on anything when we're winding. I cut this piece of aluminum, drilled it out, and tapped it with a 632 tap. We get a little of the tap sticking out, so this will have something to line up over. Now you simply hold it down and tap the hole. And repeat on the other side. Then I just like to go over these with a file quick. Now we've got perfect threads that are nice and square, and they'll thread in and thread out nice and easy. Here I have a nice chunk of tool steel. This is about 4 inches in diameter and 1 1/4 inches thick. And I drilled out here with a carbide drill bit on the drill press to make room for the eyelets. And that allows you to get your flatwork seated nice and flush with the top of that disc. Over here is the arbor press. I just have a piece of maple bridging the bottom here, and the tool steel disc goes right on top. On the underside of the ram, I've just stuck on a neodymium magnet. Stick the magnet here, and we're going to press that in to the low E side. Just get it lined up. Then we're going to go to the high E side and do the same. I made this jig to help the magnet assembly go a little bit faster. So I'm going to put these two halves like this, and grab a rubber band. I like the number 64, and just get it like that. Now we can get all of our other magnets to whatever stagger we want and load them in. And we're going to take this assembly, get the eyelets lined back up with the holes in the tool steel disc. We're just going to go right along, press each one of these magnets in while holding this firm. Now we have the pole pieces pressed in. So we're going to take this and put it aside for a second and do a little work on the top flatwork piece. Next up is the reamer. I use a 3/16 inch monster reamer. It measures 0.1875, which is perfect for this because we're using 187 magnets. So now what I do is I ream out each one of these holes. The key here is to use a really loose grip at first, so while the reamer's spinning, just get enough of it to kiss the top of the flatwork and pull it to center. Then you're going to push down and hold it in place while you ream through. So that'll guarantee that everything stays perfectly centered. So I've flipped this around because we want a flat surface against the magnets to really hold them tight against each other. Make sure that the eyelets are in these recesses that you've drilled out, because you want this to be perfectly flat while you're hammering the top piece on. So we've reamed the top flatwork piece, and what this lets us do is just get it started by pushing down just with finger pressure. So now that we've got it started and everything's lined up and looking good, I'm going to hold it with my thumb and middle finger to keep the pressure on the magnets, and then use my index finger to keep the flatwork in place. We're going to start from this end and just move over. The tool steel disc is absolutely critical here because it'll absorb all of the shock from the hammer blows. It'll keep it from recoiling and ruining your flatwork. So now I have this piece here. This is drilled out to 195 thousandths. And what it does is it'll fit around the magnets, but leave enough space so I can tap the flatwork down. I just hold it like that, give it a tap, And before moving on to each successive pull piece with that, you just want to be able to feel that this is still flat. If you want to make it even faster and easier, you can make a little piece like I did here out of 1/4 inch MDF. I did this carefully, using a Dremel and a precision router base clamped to a table with a guide bearing bit. And I just copied the flat work and drilled out these holes to 195 thousandths. You could take it here, place it over, and hammer it down, or you can take it to the arbor press. I move the magnet up here, like that, fit it over the top, and we can simply take the ram and press that down. And go over to this side and that side. And as you can see, that'll press the flat work down nice and tight while leaving room for those magnets to come up. So you can take this off, and our flat work will be seated nice and flush on top of our spacer. This is where I like to use this little pick to get these flat work remnants out of here. Just like that. Now I've also made this piece, which is routed out, recessed. You can also use just a plain block like this. So what this does is it just makes sure if any of the poles are sticking up back here, they're going to be perfectly flat. You can also give the eyelets a little inspection. If they're sticking up a little bit, and we use our eyelet setting tool to make sure that these are firmly seated. So now we can take this apart. And as you can see here, everything's lined up and we have no bulges at the top of the flat work. Common problem is to get bulging around the pole pieces, and that's simply from having it not aligned properly when you're hammering on the top flat work piece. Sometimes I like to double check, just sliding the spacers under both sides, just to make sure it's all flat and seated correctly. Carefully remove them again. Put one of these on a respirator. I forgot to do that because I was recording the video, but that's very important. Use some water-thin super glue. We're going to glue the magnets in. Get a Q-tip. I'll just work the glue all around the top flatwork piece. Now we're going to flip it and do the same thing underneath. A little trickier, but same process. So we get our glue, Q-tip, and get it fully saturated. Once that's saturated, we're going to do the bottom. You might be wondering why I only have a glove on one hand. I'm wondering the same thing. And I'll do this kind of trade-off here, where I'll hold it like that. Just saturate the edge that I was previously holding. You can really feel the fumes coming off of this glue in my eyes. Again, wear a mask. You definitely don't want to be breathing this stuff in. Okay, I've got the second glove on. And now we're just going to finish up by saturating the bottom piece with super glue. Q-tip, and get the edges just like we did with the top. Helps if you have a little piece of plastic, a bag or anything, and just set it off to the side. We glued this side first, so it should be closer to being dry. And the pole pieces shouldn't really have glue on them, so we're just going to set it down like that. Let it set up for a couple minutes. Just a helpful little tip here. I just use a Q-tip to wick any latent glue out of the tip, and then I just use a T-pin to seal it off. Seems to work pretty well, keeps the glue fresh. It's just a nice little trick there. Now, I've been using transparent Scotch tape. I've had pretty good luck with this. It's very thin, and that's all you need to prevent the wire from shorting out on the magnets. It probably won't short out anyway, but I just like to take this as a precaution. So I lay it here on the cutting mat, and on these bobbins, you can lay it on the mat and use the little markers here to see how much you've got to take off the tape. So this is just going to be like right around the 1/2 inch mark. Try to get it even with that white line on the cutting mat. Hold the straight edge down and just make a nice cut. And I like to just pry the end up with the tip of the blade like that. And catch my finger on it. Now we have our strip of tape. It's cut to size. At about 5 or 6 inches, you can see how much wraps around the bobbin, and you'll just get used to whatever length you need. And having a little overlap is fine. Get the tape on the bobbin. I'll just press it with my finger like that to make sure it's tight. Pull it taut. See that it's lining up over the magnets, covering everything. I'll just go over with my fingers like that. Make sure that it's going right up to the edge of the magnets on both sides. And with that, we're ready to wind.